Hello Math 8 students, this is Utah Middle School Math Project 3.1a, Writing Equations in Slope-Intercept Form. This is part 2, and really part 2 is mostly going to cover the next part of this packet that I passed out, 3.1b, Graphing from Slope-Intercept Form. Before we do that, we have to go over our homework problems. The ones that we did not finish in class last time or in the video were 16 and 19. Students should have finished those for homework, so I'm just going to quickly show the answers so that you can check to make sure that you do have a solid understanding of this. When I'm looking for the y-intercept, I'll wait. When I'm looking for the y-intercept, I'm looking in a table for when the x value is 0. And when the x value is 0, the y value is also 0. So for this particular problem, the y-intercept, that b value is 0. The slope, you cannot just pay attention to how the y values are changing. Yes, the y values are increasing by 1, but the y values increase by 1 as the x values increase by 2. So you might remember some earlier discussion that slope is the rise over the run, or the change in the y values over the change in the x values. So the y values changed by 1, the x values changed by 2. So the slope is not just 1, the slope is actually 1 over 2 or 1/2. Therefore, the equation is equal to y equals 1/2 times x. You can, if you want to, say plus 0, but that is no different than just saying 1/2 x. How'd you do on that one? Thumbs up, thumb sideways, thumbs down? And if you're not showing me a thumb, I'm assuming that means that you didn't do your homework. Okay, so did we learn from that then? Okay, good. Number 19, your cell phone plan has a flat rate of $30 each month. For each text you send, it costs 20 cents. This actually used to be how they would charge on your cell phone bill. You were charged per text, like it would be you could send up to 100, and then after that you were charged for each text. Which is why when Apple came out with their iMessaging, that was a big deal because they were no longer considered texts, and so it wasn't going to cost you anything extra. So with this information, the y-intercept, no matter what, it's going to cost us at least $30. So that is the charge in the beginning. The initial value is 30. It is changing by going up 20 cents every text. One thing that I would like, remember how fractions are friends. So recognizing that 20 cents is the fraction 1/5. You can say for slope that the slope is 1/5 of a dollar. You can leave it 20 cents, that's fine. But this makes it really nice and easy, and you'll be seeing this as we progress into this lesson. The equation is y equals 1/5 x plus 30. If I asked you to graph this, this would be pretty easy to graph because you know what the rise and you know what the run is. And so that's why fractions are friends. If you wrote y equals 0.2x plus 30, that is also appropriate. How'd you do on that one? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. Okay, looking pretty good across the room. Let's move on. The next one, this next set of problems are all identifying mistakes. So common mistakes that I have seen students make, they're all here in the next examples. So we're writing equations from a graph. Here is the graph that is already given. The graph is correct. The equation is what is incorrect. So this is the equation that students wrote incorrectly. What is the mistake? I'll give you a few seconds to think quietly, see if you can find the mistake first, and then we can talk about it. I don't want us to be talking with our groups just yet. Let's do quiet think time. We're going to pause the recording. Okay, what's the mistake? Let's just go through it piece by piece. I like to start at the y-intercept. According to this, the y-intercept is 2. It's intersecting at 2. Is that correct in our equation? Yeah. And according to this, the slope is, let's look for some crosshair points. I'm finding a couple because I like to test out a couple places. Looks like the slope, I'm going down 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to the right 1. So that slope is -3 over 1. Is that what this is showing? No. So what is that mistake? Summarize it in words. Emma? Yeah, it should just be a negative. So they had the right slope, they just didn't have the right direction for that slope. So what is the mistake? Slope should be negative since it's going down. Write that down. Here where it says mistake, we're putting our mistake in words. And now we can write the equation correctly. And equation written correctly would be y equals negative 3x, since the slope is actually negative 3. It is still a y-intercept of 2. That part was done correctly, so plus 2. You get the idea, right? Okay, I'm going to pause recording as students work on 21, 22, and 23. Again, the graphs are correct, the equations are what are incorrect. So find those mistakes, write down in words what that mistake is, and then write the equation correctly. We're going to pause recording as students work on this. Ready, set, go. All right, number 21. What is the mistake? Describe it in words. Number 21, what is the mistake? Thank you, Seth. Yeah, great job. They did rise over run. They wrote the slope as run over rise, which is incorrect. So kind of judging through here, let's see. Y-intercept is at -1, just like it shows in the equation. The slope, finding crosshair points, looks like I'm going up 1 and to the right 2, which means the slope should be rise over run 1/2. And they wrote a slope of 2. Great explanation. So what is that correct equation? Somebody else besides Seth now? Thank you, Brock. Yes, y equals 1/2 x minus 1. Moving on to 22. In words, what is the mistake? What is the mistake that was made? Let's go, Charlie. The y-intercept is negative, so it should be negative what? Yeah. Is it -4? Let's just double check. Yeah, it's -3. So it's not just that they put +4 when they should have put -4. If we actually look closely, we can see that the y-intercept is just completely incorrect. And it being negative is one of those things. Seth. Oh, good catch. I actually didn't recognize that. They, +4, they recognize that that was the x-intercept. That's just not how we write those equations. Good catch. Yeah, y-intercept is incorrect. They wrote the x, used x-intercept instead. Oops. So, with that in mind, what is the correct equation? What should this equation be? Gabe. Double check. 1x minus 3? Is the slope 1? We have to... 3/4, yes. The slope that they wrote in the equation was actually correct. So just finding some crosshair points here and here, it looks like it is going up 3 and to the right 4. So thanks for fixing that slope. It's not a slope of 1, it is a slope of 3/4. So 3/4 x and then minus 3. We'll do that in green. And in words, these are all great. In words, 23, what is the mistake? Thank you. Danielle? Okay, so they use the slope as the y-intercept. So the y-intercept says is 2, but what is it actually? It's 1, yeah. And it looks like there's a little bit more going on too. It shows that the slope is 1. What is the slope really? 2, yeah. So they have the right numbers, they just have those numbers in the wrong spots, right? Mixed up slope and y-intercept. One thing that is probably worth pointing out now as we're writing out these sentences, understand that it is a y-intercept, not a y-intersect. Yes, it is where it intersects the y-axis, but that intersection point along an axis has a special name, an intercept. Please make sure that you understand that difference in that terminology. So what is that correct equation? What would I write instead? Maverick. Yeah, y equals 2x plus 1. Y-intercept here at 1, and the slope, as we already discussed, is up 2 over 1, or just simply 2. And now we are officially ready to move on to the next section. I did combine 2 lessons here. 3.1b focuses on graphing from slope-intercept form. We are basically professionals now. We can write an equation from a graph. We can write an equation from a table, from a story, just given these pieces of information. But can we work in the reverse order? What if I just give you an equation eventually? Can you still graph it? Okay, so we're going to start slowly, kind of just baby step it. On this coordinate plane, I want you to draw a line with slope of 1/3. Notice it doesn't say anything about where the y-intercept is. It just says draw any line with the slope of 1/3. How do you know your line has a slope of 1/3, and what did you specifically do to draw that? I want A and B to be written out in words. Go ahead and pause the recording as you discuss this with your groups. Ready, set, go. All right, here's me going through this exercise. It says a slope of 1/3, and I hear slope, so I think rise over run. So wherever I start, I want to make sure that, let's make this my starting point, I want to make sure that I have a rise of 1 and a run of 3. And I'm going to continue that process until I get a few good crosshair points to draw my line. A rise of 1 and a run of 3, both in the positive direction, because it's a positive rise, a positive run. A rise of 1, run of 3. And once I get a couple of good points, then I can just use my ruler, connect those, and there is my line with slope of 1/3. One thing that I really want you to get in the habit of, again, just make sure you're drawing those arrows at the end of those lines, because that graph does, or that line does continue. Even if we're done drawing it, it continues on infinitely. So acknowledge that, draw those arrows. How do you know that your line has a slope of 1/3? Did you follow a similar thing to what I did? Rise and run, right? How did we draw that line? 1/3 represents a rise and a run. So pick a point, show a rise of 1 and a run of 3. And how do you know that it has that? We can do it repeatedly, right? You can find crosshair points. And with those crosshair points, we can always find a rise of 1 and a run of 3. It's a great way to summarize that. With that in mind, the next problem, draw a line with slope of -2. What is that going to be if it has a slope of -2? The first one was easy. It was a fraction. We could easily see the rise and the run. What are you going to do now that it's not a fraction? Your thoughts before I set you free to get started on that? What are we going to do? Daxton. Make it a fraction. How do I turn -2 into a fraction? Yeah, -2 over 1. -2 divided by 1 is equal to -2. That's one way that we could do that. Draw a line with a slope of -2. Again, we're going to pause the recording as students do this, discuss with their groups what they're going to write down for A and B. Ready, set, go. A slope of -2, what is that going to look like, Sam? Down to every x. Yes. So again, we turned it into a fraction so we can see a rise and we can see a run. So no matter where I decide to start, like maybe I decide to start my line here, to find the next point, I'm going to rise -2. That means I'm going down 2. And I'm going to run +1. There's going to be another point. And I can repeat that process. I can go down 2 and to the right 1, showing multiple places that will all form a nice straight line. And again, getting in that habit of drawing those arrows at the ends of those lines to show that even though we're done drawing the line doesn't stop existing just because we're done drawing it. And here is another thing that I think is interesting to point out. Okay, what if I'm choosing this crosshair point and this crosshair point, and watch the direction of my drawing here. What is the rise? What direction did I just go? To what direction, though? What direction did I go, though? I didn't go down, right? I went up. And what direction am I going now as I run? Negative, exactly. So maybe, is it safe to say that -2 is equal to a rise of 2 and a run of -1? Is that safe to say? Yeah, did it work out the exact same way? Because what is a positive divided by a negative? Still a negative. Okay, so make sure that you understand that. We are going to move on. What is the y-intercept and what is the slope of this line? Given just the equation, do you feel like you can identify the slope and the y-intercept enough that you can graph it on the grid? Okay, let's talk about that first. Look at that equation. What is the y-intercept? Anyone who's ready? I'll see those hands. Thank you. Let's start with Gabe. Yeah, it's -1, not just 1. We're subtracting 1, so the y-intercept is -1. Let's start there. Where am I going to find -1? Yeah, what is going on out there? I do not know. Probably right. There is the y-axis. There is -1 on the y-axis, so I'm going to start there. I'll wait. We already have enough disruptions out in the hall. We don't need any more in the class. Y-intercept right there at -1. That's where I'm starting. What is the slope? Again, look at that equation. Where do we find the slope? How can we identify it? It's the same hands as usual. I want to see some fresh new hands or I'll cold call. Okay. Danielle. Yes, it's what's multiplying by the x. And what is multiplying by the x for this problem? 2/3. So the slope is 2/3. From this point that I already graphed, from this point that I started with, that means I already have a rise and I have a run. Let's find those points then. From here, let's rise 2 and let's run 3 in the positive direction. There's another point that's going to be on the line. Repeat that process. Do it again. Rise 2 and run 3. We all know what it sounds like. We don't need to talk about it. Okay, eyes on the screen. One thing that I want us to be really, really clear about. We have found a couple of points that are on the line. We're ready to use our ruler and graph it. Please understand, although sometimes we refer to the y-intercept as the starting value or the initial value, our line doesn't technically start there, right? Our line should extend beyond that as well. Make sure that when you're drawing these lines that you are drawing them with that in mind. And again, it is a line, so we're putting those arrows on the end showing that it extends continuously. Here's some ways that you can check to make sure that your line has been done correctly. What if, eyes on the screen, be careful with this, from this point to this crosshair point, what is the rise? What direction did I just go? Down, so -2. What direction am I going now for the run? Negative. What does that mean? A -2 divided by a -3. What does that simplify to be if I have a negative divided by a negative? Yeah, it's still positive. So notice that the slope is still positive. Even if we have a brain that works a little bit differently, maybe we want to read it from right to left instead of left to right, as long as you're paying attention to the directions and the signs, you're still going to say, hey, that still is a positive slope. Okay. We have done all parts, A, B, and C. It is your job now. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They get harder and harder and harder. Then we have a 10, find, fix, and justify. I want you to work and get through as many as you can. We'll go through what we can on the recording, but practice this now without my assistance. I want you to graph these lines. What is the y-intercept? What is the slope? Take the time to write that down. Once you do that, graphing becomes much easier. Pause the recording now as you work on all the remaining problems. Okay, let's check our answer. What is the y-intercept of number 4? For the sake of time, I'm going to go through these quickly. The y-intercept is 1. Even better, if we wrote it as coordinates, 0, 1. I'm not going to be quite that picky. The y-intercept is 1. So, there we go. What is the slope? The slope is what's multiplied by the x. The slope is 3. It's best when it's a fraction, so I can change 3 to the fraction 3/1, and that way I can see the rise and the run. So from here, I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3 and run 1. There's another point. Continue that. Let's rise another 3 and run another 1. And now I have enough that I can draw the line that goes through those points. Again, getting into that habit of putting those arrows on at the end. I also like to try and extend that line to the edges of the graph. Mine didn't go completely, and that's okay. But don't just draw it between those 3 points. That line continues on beyond that. The next one, what is the y-intercept? What are we adding on at the end? Nothing. So what is that y-intercept? 0, or the coordinates 0, 0. That means it's going through the origin. That means this one's going to be proportional. What is the slope? We have -3/4, and the discussion that we had as I walked around the room, they said, well, that's negative. That means both of them are negative, both the rise and the run. Think about that. What is a negative divided by a negative? A positive. So is it okay to put the negative in the rise and in the run? No. Pick one. Either -3/4, either it's part of the rise, or make it part of the run. Let me show you what I mean by that. This is my starting point. So from here, I'm going to rise a -3. That means I'm falling. And I'm going to run a +4. That means I'm going to the right. There is one of those points. What if I did it the other way? What if in that same starting point, I decided to rise +3? That means I'm going, that means I'm going up 3. And running -4, that means I'm going to the left 4. What do you notice about those 3 points? They're all on the same line, right? So again, it doesn't matter if you view it as a negative rise or a negative run. Just make sure you don't view it as negative rise and negative run. Number 6 was interesting, so I want to make sure that we have time to go over 6, 8, and 9. Number 6, what is the slope? What is the slope? Siley? Yeah, exactly. Do you notice that this was reversed? They put the x at the end. So, is the slope the very first number that we see? No, the slope is the coefficient of x. It's what's being multiplied by x. What is being multiplied by x? 1. So the slope here is equal to 1, which means the y-intercept is -2. Now we can graph that. Y-intercept of -2. Slope of 1, that means I'm going up 1 over 1. Rise 1, run 1. Rise 1, run 1. And your line would look something like this. Again, edge to edge of the graph as much as you can with those arrows. 8 and 9, do you remember what we talked about in our last lesson? So what is y equals 5 going to look like? I should have everybody's attention on the board right now. Y equals 5, what is that line going to look like, Tage? Yeah, all we have here is just the y-intercept. What is the slope of this line? 0, which means it's a horizontal line that has a y-intercept of 5. With that in mind then, what is x equals -1 going to look like? What is that going to look like, Emery? That's exactly right. This tells us the x-intercept is -1. There isn't anything multiplied by the x because the slope is undefined. So it is going to be a vertical line going straight up and down. And we are out of time for this recording. So that means the only things that you would really need to complete for homework are 7 and 10 if you haven't done them in class. If you have done them in class, raise your hand. Okay, most students in class don't have homework. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.